Hello everyone and welcome to another video in the Nations series. Today we are going to take a look at the United States, the USA. Of course, well, the last video was about the USSR, so it's kind of, expected that I'm going to cover a similar deck in the other side, just to keep out things balanced. Now, we are going to do exactly the same thing as we did in the previous video, which is an overall view of all the deck and how it works. Not exactly looking at individual units, but it's more about giving an overall feel of the deck itself and how it can be used for good effect. So let's start with logistics, which is pretty much straightforward, to be honest. It's pretty flexible as well, and in that sense is similar to the Soviets. It has somewhat less capable transport choppers. Still, the Stallion, I think this helicopter is pretty good as a transport chopper. The Super Chinooks are also really nice, but well, you have helicopter transports. You have two different choices for ground supply. Trucks with a lot of availability but little supply per unit, or HEMTTs, which have a huge supply but you get only a handful of them, so up to you to decide. Helicopter to capture enemy zones, well, is a little better than the Soviet one, and well, the standard set of different units for capturing enemy zones. Command vehicles in the shape of APCs and command tanks. The command tanks, well, the M60 is not really great, to be honest. It's kind of lackluster, but the Abrams is not bad at all. Still, is not even close to the Soviet one. Anyway, moving on to infantry. Now, infantry, and the Americans have a problem with the infantry that kind of sets it a little under the Soviet one in what flexibility applies. And that's, first of all, they don't have as much varied selection of transports as the Soviets have. With the Soviets, you can have from AA transports to ATM transports to a lot of different choppers options, which are extremely good support choppers as well. With the Americans, you do get none of that. Transport-wise, you get the N113s, the Bradleys, which are great units, but then the transport choppers are not as good because, well, they have miniguns, but they don't have rockets, and really, rockets are extremely good for suppressing enemies while you are landing. Now, the next thing is that the Americans don't have a dedicated ATM squad, and that's a pretty big deal if you want to ask me. A proper team of ATMs, a two-man team with a range of 2,600 meters, is a huge area denial weapon and can really give a lot of points, and you don't get any of those with the Americans. Still, you have ATM squads with the light riflemen, which have the Dragon, which is crap, the light rifleman 90, which get the Super Dragon, which is not that crap, but still is nowhere close to the Russian Gornostrelskis. And then you have the Mountaineers, who have the Dragon 2, which is also pretty bad, to be honest. So, in what regards to ATMs, the Americans are a little bit lacking in infantry. However, in what regards to AA, they get a really good deal. The Red Eye is pretty much crap, the Stinger A is extremely good, the Stinger C is just awesome. So yeah, again you have two choices if you choose if you want to get crappy manpads with a lot of availability, extremely good manpads with much lower availability, or a middle ground with the Stinger A's. Usually Stinger A's or Stinger C's are more than good enough. The Red Eye is actually lackluster in my opinion. Flamethrower infantry, they only have the assault engineers, but they come with a napalm launcher, which is more than good enough. They are pretty good. Special forces, all the Delta forces. People say these are not that great. Honestly, I always have good results with the Delta forces. I think it's mostly because of the M60 CQC. I mean, this has a huge range for a machine gun, and it's really good in close quarters. So it's kind of good in most situations. The problem is that the anti-tank rocket is not that good. But still, these are really good special units. Of course, they are not as specialized as the Russian spetsnaz, but still, they are actually pretty good. I think, at least, in my opinion. Standard line infantry in the rifleman and rifleman 90, nothing to write home about in them. They are M16 and M16 with different 80 rocket launchers, depending on the version. They are pretty good anyway. And then you have SOC squads. Now, the SMO. The SMO is a particular unit the Soviets don't have. And this is actually pretty good because this is a 5-man strong tank hunter team, which has a pretty good anti-tank rocket, but this rocket can also be used against infantry, and they have a huge rate of fire. So these are really good to clear enemy infantry as well as tanks, especially so in forests. But well, it's kind of a very specialized unit. You may want to throw one of them in if you feel like it. They are also Marines, they are shock troops, so they are pretty good. And then you have the US Marines, which are very good. They are kind of the Morskaya Pehota of the Americans, 15 units. What you don't have is a replication or a version of the BDB, for instance, with the Russian Skept. So your only shock troops are the Marines. You don't get anything else. So again, we see that the Russians have more variety. They have different shock troops to choose from. They have different ATGM teams to choose from, etc. The Americans are more specialized. Still, they are very good. Support. Now, support is again a zone where I think they are really good, but in some ways they are a little bit lackluster. As for AA, self-propeller artillery, you have the PBAS and the Vulcan. They are pretty unimpressive, mostly because of the assault range. Most helicopters are going to be able to kill your PBAS before the PBAS is in range. Still, this is a pretty decent unit, but be mindful that it is limited. As for missiles, you have the Avenger, which is extremely good for openers, very fast unit, very good counter for enemy chopper rushes, because this thing can destroy Mi-8s in no time. It's also very fast, very quick on the road, so can keep up with your fastest units while deploying. Then you have the Chaparral family, which honestly out of them, the only one worth using is the last one, the M48A3 Chaparral. The previous ones, really the accuracy is so subpar, and that, yeah, they are lackluster. Also, the last version of the Chaparral has a great range against helicopters and airplanes. This is a very good AA unit, and they have a pretty decent amount of missiles, so they don't need immediate resupply. They are also amphibious, which is kind of a decent thing. This thing is really good. Still, I think the Tunguska is better. That's my personal opinion, but this can compete. This is one of the best AA units in the game, no question about that. Good accuracy, good HE power, extremely good range, both against helicopters and planes, and yeah. The only problem maybe is it's a little bit slow, but yeah, you can have everything, I guess. Then you have the iHawks, which are pretty decent long-range missiles, but again, I think they are a little bit lackluster if you compare with the books, for instance. I mean, they get great HE power, they get pretty good accuracy, they get extremely good range, but they only get 3 missiles per launcher, and then you have to resupply them, and these things take a crap load of supply. The books get 4. That's, I think, a little bit better. But yeah, still, this is a very good AA unit. No question about that. Howitzers. You have the M109 family from the vanilla one to the Paladin. Again, this is a kind of a progression from more spammy, less accurate, and effective units to more expensive, less spammy, more precise artillery. the Paladin is okay. It's not extremely good, but it's pretty decent. Then you have the Sniper Artillery. Again, not as good as the Soviet Malkas, for instance, but still pretty good Sniper Artillery. Again, you have to pick your choice if you want a Sniper Artillery or a General Purpose Artillery. As for rocket launchers, again, specialized. The unit is extremely good, but you don't have any options. With the Soviets, for instance, you can get the Uragan, which is a great saturation, area saturation rocket launcher with a huge 80 power, and you have the Smerch, which has cluster ammunition and AP power. With the Americans, you only have the standard MLRS with ATACMS 80 ACMS missiles. You get 2 of them. They are cluster ammunition and they have a huge AP power and they are super accurate. The unit is extremely good for what it is, but again, if you want a rocket launcher, this is the only thing you get. You don't get any more options. Again, extremely good unit, very specialized. That's the kind of thing for the Americans. Finally, mortars. I love the LABM. I simply love this thing. I mean, it's so quick, has a decent rate of fire. This thing is almost uncatchable. The other rocket launchers are okay-ish, but in my opinion, the LAB is the best by far. Only because it's so damn quick, and also it's extremely cheap, and you can get a lot of them per card. So yeah, tanks. Now tanks. Again, we see the difference between the Soviets and the Americans. With the Soviets, you have 3 pages long of tanks and of different families, and you have to pick your choice about what you wanted exactly out of your tanks, which is kind of complicated because you have to know the mechanics of the game, and you have to understand how tanks work to pick the best choices for the deck and the way you are going to use your deck. With the American, you only get, as you can see, 5 different branches of tanks. No more than that. That's all. You get the Marine branch, you get the Army Abrams branch, you get the Cavalry branch, you get the Patton branch, and you get the Starship or the ATGM branch. It's very hard to do wrong picks in an American deck because I mean, you have much less options than in the Soviet one. The tanks are fantastic for the most part, but there's no flexibility. You get what you get, and that's it. But let's look at the different families. First, the Abrams family. All of them are fantastic for their cost. Even the vanilla M1 Abrams is pretty good for what it is because of the very good armor for its cost. The gun is under par, but yeah, well. They are really good. The M1A2 is probably the best tank in the game. I would go that far to say that is one of the best combination of armor, offensive power, and mobility. However, you only get 2 of them, and then you have to step down to the M1A1HA or the M1A1HC, which are quite less capable as the A2. Again, as you can see, the Soviets have 2 different cards of top end of the line tanks. The Americans only get 1. The availability is much lower. They are better tanks, but you get less. So that's kind of the idea. Then you have the Marine branch. The Marine are the Marine Parons, the M48, the M60A1, M60A1 ADS, the M60A1 IRA, and the M1A1 HC Abrams. The Abrams is extremely good, but it's kind of expensive. The M60A1 IRA is actually pretty decent for the cost, but I think that for 10 points the Abrams is a little bit better. Still, these tanks are, well, the Abrams is awesome. The M60A1 IRA is pretty nice, and the others, well, for the cost, they are not really bad. So you have to decide if you want some cheap units or you want more expensive ones. Then you have the cavalry tanks. The Sheridan, which is one of the ATGM tanks for the Americans, has the Silica C, which is an uninspiring ATGM, but still is an ATGM. Then they have a very good cannon against enemy infantry. This thing is actually pretty good to clear forests of enemy infantry because of the huge gun. Also pretty cheap. and very mobile. So, well, decent unit. Then you have the M8 AES, which is awesome, simply awesome. It has 15 rounds per minute with a range of 2,275 meters. This thing is just brutal. The only thing is that, of course, has no armor whatsoever. So as soon as they get speed at, they blow up. But if you can keep them out of being targeted by the enemy, these things own. Extremely, extremely good unit, and a very overlooked one. I see them not that much in the battlefields. Then you have the Patton family. Pretty good tanks for the cost. The Super M60 is actually pretty decent. Again, the only problem is 5 points more, and then one Abrams I think offers a little bit more. But again, you have the choice to pick one of both, depending on your tastes. And finally, the ATGM family, M60A2 and M60A2E2 starships. They come with the Silegag missile, which is not the Silegag C of the Shorian. This is the plain Silegag, which is crap. Honestly, these tanks, I honestly think they are not worth it. However, the MPT-70, if you are looking for American substitute for the BMPT, the Russian vehicle, look no further because you have it right here. Huge gun, amazing against infantry with 10 rounds per minute, autocannon, and on top of that, Silegag C ATGM, which is pretty good and works pretty well against enemy tanks. It has pretty decent armor as well, and it's cheaper than the MBPT or BMPT. Sorry. So this thing is a monster against enemy infantry in forests and close quarters. Usually tanks in close quarters against enemy infantry suffer a lot, but these tanks are really, really great for that. So those are the tanks. Recon, one of the specializations of the Americans. They get very good recon. You have choppers with rockets and good optics, which are not extremely good, to be honest. You have the longbow, which is extremely, extremely, extremely effective anti-tank unit. Exceptional optic, and fire don't forget Hellfires. This is really good, but you have to micro it really, really, really a lot, because otherwise you're going to lose it and it's going to hurt. They are very expensive and you only get a handful of them. Still, extremely good unit. You have the standard Humvee Recon, the standard Peak or Recon, which I will say that, has very good options. Most of the vehicles are uninspiring, but I'm going to name the best. The M551A1 TTS, which is the reconversion of the Sheridan, is pretty much a Sheridan with very good optics. This is a pretty strong unit. However, it's vastly overshadowed by the Bradleys. Now the Recon Bradleys are all of them awesome. Very good optics in all of them. Very good autocannon and ATGMs. I would say that probably the best option is the last one, the 90.1, because it has toe-twos. It's a very serious threat against enemy tanks, and is very mobile, has very good optics. This is a really good unit. However, I would say that the M3A1 is also pretty good and is less expensive, so you have to choose what you want. Infantry Recon comes with the Rangers, which are pretty strong, 5-man teams, which are decent in combat. They are not combat units, but can defend themselves. And then the Navy SEALs, which are just awesome. These are, I would say that this is the replica, American replica to the specializations. They are a little bit inferior because of the grenade launcher having a shorter range than the napalm thrower of the specializations. But to compensate for that, they have a better machine gun. This thing rips off enemy infantry like there's no tomorrow. Really, these things are amazing, and they get very good optics. The specialists don't. So yeah, don't write them off. They are extremely good units. Then you have the Recon Choppers, the Kiowa family, all of them pretty good. I would say that the Kiowa Warrior is not really worth it. The Hellfire is nice, but it's very expensive for a Recon Chopper. I would go for the Kiowa D. It still has some weapons, but the important thing is exceptional optics here. And finally, you have the Marine Recon, the V150, the V150 20 millimeters. Little bit subpar, to be honest, because of they only get good optics. And then the LAB-25 Scout, only good optics, but it has an autocannon, and it's a pretty good autocannon. So yeah, this is pretty good. I would rate the Bradleys much higher, however, but the LABs are more cheap, so it's kind of a trade-off of whatever you want. Vehicles. Well, in vehicles you have a lot of ATGMs, kind of compensates for the fact that the infantry doesn't have a dedicated ATGM team, so let's start by them. You have the LAB-AT, which is a super fast ITO fitted anti-tank unit, extremely good. You have the M901A1 with Toutsus, which are extremely good ATGMs, not as mobile as the LAB-ATs, but the missile is better, so you get to pick which of one you want. The other ones are, well, one of them has a standard tow and is very cheap, the other one has an ITO and is kind of middle of the ground. And then you have a similar option in jeeps. You can get up to ITOs in just plain jeeps, and Humvees with Toutsus, which are extremely effective for their cost. Then flamethrower, and in flamethrower the Americans are not as good as the most of the Redford units, mostly because they don't get a main cannon. I mean, the Russian, for instance, the Russian TO-55 gets a flamethrower and a main gun. With the American, the main gun is not there. You only get the napalm launcher. It's still very good, but it's not as good as the Redford napalm launchers. And finally, fire support, which get in the recoilless rifles on those, which is, well, it has its uses, but I honestly don't think they are really worth it. The combats are amazing. These are really, really good. I mean, a 45 millimeter autocannon in what is more or less a Bradley chassis. Very good unit. Also, you get a very good infantry fighting vehicle with the LAB-25, the fighting version of the transport. So it's really, really, really good. And finally, you get an engineering tank with a very big howitzer. Kind of cool if you want to clear forests or towns from afar. So yeah, those are the vehicles. Helicopters. Now in helicopters you have again different families. First the Cobra family. You get the Marines Cobra, the Sea Cobra and the Super Cobra. The Super Cobra has Sidewinder missiles, which are pretty good, but you only get super planes, so you got to have to keep that in mind, and Toutsus. The Cobras get progressively better from the AH-1S to the AH-1F. Then you get the same rockets, but the ATGMs get better and better. Up to you to pick what one of them you like the most. Then you have the Apache, which is not the airland battle Apache, because this one doesn't have fire and forget missiles, and that's a huge deal if you ask me. Still a very strong chopper overall, very good, very capable. So yeah, there's that. Then you have the little bird, which is kind of uninspiring, to be honest. It's good to keep enemy infantry suppressed, but honestly, I think the weapons are not good enough. But I've seen people using them for good effect, so up to you. Then you have the Black Hawk with Hellfires and miniguns. This is kind of a cheap alternative to Apache. You get a big chopper, but it's not armored. That's one of the things. It gets 30mm miniguns and Hellfire, so well, it's not as capable as the Apache, but almost, and it's cheaper. So yeah, there's that. Then you have the anti-chopper Kiowa, which is honestly, is one of the worst helicopters in the game, because in a game where you have I don't know, Zeta 9s or Gazelles or Tigre H-8Ds, the Stinger simply doesn't cut it. It doesn't have enough range. Still, well, it's a good unit to have around. It's capable, but is not the best around. Then you have the Seahawk, which is kind of the cheap version of the DAP, but only has 4 Hellfires. And then the Hawks, lots of rockets, and one of them has a grenade launcher. Very cheap suppression choppers if you want to use them. And finally, the air. Probably the air is the best category of the Americans because you have so many different options. First, the A10 Thunderbolt 2, which is very good, but I think there's a better option in the American deck. You'll see it in a second. The Maverick only has 40% accuracy, and that hurts. That really hurts, honestly. The gun is amazing, however, and this thing, I mean, turn radius of 150. This thing is one of the most maneuverable things in the game. The problem is that it's a little bit slow, but it has a buttload of armor. This thing is actually pretty tough to bring down. So it's a good unit. It's a very good unit, but I think for anti-tank roles, I think there are better options. You'll see it later. Then the Skyhawks, one of them with rockets, one of them with 225 kilogram bombs. Very cheap throwaway planes if you want to use them. Intruders with 12 225 kilogram bombs. Pretty good. For their cost, they are extremely cheap and pretty effective. They have Corsairs, 2 napalm canisters, and a Vulcan cannon with pretty decent ECM and a very decent cost. So again, low cost, very nice unit. They have the Harrier family, from the AV-8A to the AV-8C and the AV-8B. Now, make no mistake, the best one of them is the B version because it has sidewinders, very good Mavericks, and an amazing equalizer gun. The others get Aden AA guns, which are not anywhere as good. One of them gets 500 kilogram bombs, the other one gets Hydra rockets. I would say that the B version is really good, the others not so much. But well, up to you again. The 2 first Harriers are really cheap, so yeah, you can use them for very little cost. Then you have the Prowler, a very capable Sealed plane with 2 standard anti-radar missiles and 50% ECM, which is really good. Then you have the Raven, which I would say is one of the better Sealed planes of the game. It has 2 harm Sealed missiles, 60% ECM, which is just insane, 1000 km per hour speed, which is amazing, and good stealth, which is huge for a Sealed plane. This is really good. Then you have the standard attack F-111s, one with cluster bombs, the F version, and one with normal HC bombs. Very good for area saturation attacks. Then you have the Nighthawk, I think a hugely overrated plane. Yes, it has exceptional stealth, but yes, it has 0% ECM. In anywhere where the enemy has any meaningful AA support, this thing is dead. So it's good, it's extremely good. The bomb is brutal. It's very hard to see it coming, so you can't really try to avoid the attack. But if you have any AA cover, the Nighthawks tend to go down and go down fast. I think it's really overrated, but that's my opinion. It's a very capable unit and well used. It can wreak havoc, but I would say that the same can be said about most any other options in the game. Fighters, you have the A-15 Eagles, the A version with the Sparrow, which are not fire and forget, and the C Eagle with AMRAAMs, which are much better because they are fire and forget. These are probably one of the best fighters in the game. I would say that the Rafales are better, but these are really good. The Su-27 PUs are every bit as good as this, by the way. But yeah, still is an amazing fighter, indeed. Then you have the Strike Eagle, which is, I will say, if the Nighthawk is one of the most overrated units in the game, the Strike Eagle is one of the most underrated. I would rate the Strike Eagle much higher than the Nighthawk. First of all, because it has 40% TCM, and that's huge. Second of all, 1000 km per hour, which is also huge. 4 1000 kilogram bombs, which are brutal. Just, wow, these things clear out any micro troop concentrations in one single strike. And on top of that, they get Sidewinder M's, which are extremely good missiles. And it's not as expensive as in the land battle. This is one of the best planes. I will load one of these instead of an Nighthawk any day of the week. Then you have the Fighting Falcons, which are multi-role planes with Sidewinders and cluster bombs. Well, if you like cluster bombs, they are good. While Whistle, the F4G with Strike, Seared missiles, and Sidewinder and a Vulcan. This is kind of a jack of all trades plane. You can use it as a seed, you can use it as an anti-chopper plane, you can use it as a bait for enemy AA while other planes are coming in. Pretty capable for its cost. Then you have the Phantoms. The first one is a fighter version, which is honestly scrap. Just 4 missiles, and they are all 35% accuracy. This thing is just useless, in my opinion at least. Then you have the Napalm Phantom, which is awesome. You get 8 napalm canister. This thing carpet bomb places in flames. Extremely good unit and not that expensive. And then you have the Hornets, and that's why I say that the Thunderbolt is not as great. Because FA618C Hornet has F Mavericks with 50% accuracy, longer range. They have self protection in the shape of Sidewinder. They have a gun. If you know how to use your planes to circle just out of the enemy AA cover, lobbing Mavericks while they are circling, this thing is insane. It's just insane. It gets much better because now you have the option to load 2 of them in rookies instead of 1 veteran. I will still go for the veteran one, but you can put 2 of them in your deck if you want. This thing is amazing, and I rate it much higher than the Thunderbolt, honestly. It doesn't have the gun, but it has the missiles. And finally, the F-16 fighter. The Block 52. Awesome. Awesome for its cost. Has 4 AMRAAMs, 2 M Sidewinders, has a very good turning radius, very good ECM, extremely good AA unit. So as you can see, you have very good things in every category. You have exceptional area bombers, you have exceptional fighters, you have exceptional SEED, you have exceptional ATGM planes. So yeah, the Air Force of the United States is amazing. Now let's take a look at the different deck options you have for the Americans. Create Americans type. Motorized is under par, and I would say that is under par because you don't get. I'm going to illustrate this. With the Russians, for instance, you have a lot of vehicles which can double as tanks, as the Norobs or the Salos. With the Americans, you get the M48, which is useless, the Sheridan, which is kind of okay, but in the vehicle category, you simply have nothing that can double as a tank. You are going to miss a lot. You simply have no armor support. The Sheridans are okay, but they are not good enough to cover for that. And that probably is the biggest single point against the motorized decks for the Americans. They are viable, but they are hard to play, to be honest. Next, armored units. Very good. Extremely good, very viable. As good as the Russian ones. This is a very good deck, the Armored USA one. Support. The thing is, Russians have more variety of support weapons. They have Buratinos, they have better, well, not better, they have more varied rocket launchers, they have more varied artillery, and they have a lot more varied AA. They have Bugs, they have Tors, they have Tunguskas especially, they have Strelas. So in a Russian support you can make it much more, let's say, flexible than the American one. The American one is pretty flexible, to be honest, but not as much as the Russian one. Still is pretty good if you use it correctly. This, remember, support decks are not from spamming artillery from the spawn. They are to support other players. Marines. I would say that they are extremely good, and they are extremely good, but it has just one problem. And the problem is that you get no fighters. You don't. You simply don't. With the Russians, you get the Yak 141, which is an extremely good fighter. With the Americans, you don't get any fighter. If you want something with long range in your AA weapons, you have to go to the Marine section and choose either a Tomcat, which in my opinion is utterly crap. The Tomcat is bad as heck because the accuracy is only 40%, and that simply is not good enough. Or you have to pick Super Hornet, which has AMRAAMs and use it as an air superiority fighter, which is a waste because this thing is for attacking enemy ships. So other than that, that's the only bad I put to this deck. The American Marine deck is amazing. It's really fun to play as well. But that's a problem. Remember, with the Marines you are going to have that problem. You don't have a proper fighter. Mechanized deck. I will rate it as much better than the Soviet one. Especially so because the American motorized one is so uninspiring. With the mechanized you get some Abrams, which are extremely good. And that makes a pretty good deck. Mechanized for the Americans is really good. And Airborne is better than the Russian because you get, I think you get better transport choppers in the sense that they are faster, but it has exactly the same problem. You have no AA, you have Avengers, which are okay. I mean, they are decent AA units, but they don't cure it against enemy planes. It has a pitiful range of 1,820 meters against enemy planes. You are defenseless against enemy airstrikes. So I would say that it's the same as the Russian airborne deck. It's not really viable because you don't have any AA cover whatsoever. So yeah, that's it for the American deck. I hope you found this useful, that you understand it better how it works. What's their advantages? Their advantages basically is that they are a pretty flexible selection of units, just not as flexible as the Russians, but they get better individual units as the Russians. So it's kind of a trade-off. They are as good as each other, but one of them is more flexible, the other one is better in their units. And especially the best part about the Americans is the planes. Is the obvious and most blatant advantage. The Air Force of the USA is amazing. They have awesome planes. So yep, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you had fun, and as always, thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you later.